If you were to look at the history of public disorder, you would find a rather kind of, some might say, a confused picture. You'd certainly find a very checkered picture. Reasoning, motives, justification. Somebody in there would throw in the question, were they right? Well, the suffragettes would certainly say they were right. Look what happened. But of course, it's very hard to ever justify in any shape or form any sort of violence, particularly violence that results in either loss of life or severe injury, whether that's to the police, whether it's to individuals on whatever side of a discussion or a debate. It's very hard to wear that hat and say, yeah, that's perfectly fine to lob a brick at a copper's head, because it clearly isn't. They are there, by the way, to try and quell and assist in whatever has kicked off or is going on. We know that Portadown last night, fourth day of violence, continuing a trend, missiles thrown at officers, sparked earlier in the week, of course, and it's just carried on. Police say 63 of their officers have now been injured over the course of the last few nights after coming under a sustained attack with heavy masonry and fireworks. Nobody's going to justify that. Here's where the problem slightly begins. John Boucher, who's the top cop there in Northern Ireland, has warned, quote, bigots and racists behind earlier nights of unrest that his officers will be coming for you. This, of course, all began after an alleged assault on a young girl. Two teenagers arrested and charged at the moment. This happened at the weekend, an incident that triggered these protests and descended into violence in the County Antrim town. Further traumatised, of course, by rioting on Monday and then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So lots of officers injured. There have been some arrests. The police said, stop the violence. We will come after you. We will arrest you. We will prosecute you successfully. It is not in any way a way for a civilised society to behave, and it must stop now. When it came to the issue of integration and immigration, he said, oh, he didn't say anything. Sorry. No, he had nothing to say on that point. I thought there might have been some. I've looked through all the notes. I've checked the data, and I can't find anything. I also can't find anything from any politicians on this as well. So this is one of those moments where you can sort of wear two hats. Nobody is going to justify setting fire to things, throwing bricks into people's houses, potential loss of life with that kind of behaviour. That is, you know, everyone's going to call that out for what it is. But does that mean we don't investigate ever what the initial cause of this? This was not just a case of there has been a crime committed, two men have been arrested for it, and they happen to come from a particular ethnic group or certainly a different country. It's not just about that. It's about the much wider issue of that. It's about people in that neck of the woods feeling what people are feeling all over the place, and that is that social cohesion is not working. And I'm putting that very gently and nicely. Social cohesion is not really working. We appear to have found ourselves with 200 people living literally on our doorstep who have very different values to us, partly because they come from a different place, or certainly, and that doesn't mean that if you come from a different place, you automatically have different values. You can come from a different place that is very, very different culturally, but possibly have the same values. But that was the sense. Now, you can say that's right, you can say it's wrong, but that is absolutely the sense of people in Ballymena and elsewhere. And something kicks off. So notwithstanding what I said earlier, you can't justify the violence, but I think you explore the reason. And you would be remiss, frankly, if you didn't. The people that don't want to explore the reason are our politicians, and in this case also the head honcho over there at the Police Service of Northern Ireland, who is merely talking about bigots and racists without really getting to the core of, well, what have you done in this neck of the woods? What has happened in this neck of the woods that has started this? Now, of course, that's not, that would be seen as victim blaming, that's the phrase, isn't it? Oh, so you're blaming the victims who are having bricks thrown at them and their houses attacked. No, it's not as simple as that. If you want to have an intelligent debate about this stuff, then you've got to be prepared to stand on some uncomfortable areas that we've been told forever, if you say this or that, then you're a mad old racist or you're a bigot or something of that order. Do you know what? It's just possible you're not. It's just possible you have a genuine, well thought out, intellectual and educated view, and often lived experience view of these things, and that's the reason. behind it? 0344 499 1000. So when somebody mentions riots to you, and whether you're talking about Southport, and I don't think we need to talk about what happened in Salford this week. I think that was a whole slightly different issue where things kicked off maybe for a different reason. But you look at Ballymena and look at Southport, and there's predictions there will be others. What do you think is behind this? What do you? What's your explanation for the anger? 0344 499 1000. Let's get a word on this and the other big stories of the day, and there's lots to get through. Isabel Oakeshott, Talk's international editor, is back with us. Isabel, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. I think, there are communities all over the UK that are on the edge, frankly, because this process of mass uncontrolled immigration has been so badly managed, that the feelings of resentment between existing communities and incomers are beginning to boil over. And that is on the government. As you said, no one's condoning violence or anyone going on the rampage. But if you import literally millions of people over a short period of time who come from very different backgrounds and cultures and are seen to be given preferential treatment with public services or access to accommodation and so on. And it doesn't matter whether they really are, it's a perception thing. If people think that these incomers, as they see them, are getting preferential treatment and they don't see that the incomers are doing anything positive in return, then that is a recipe for complete and utter disaster. And I think that's where we are. And I don't know how this evolves in coming years, because this government has no plan, no possible plan to stop the boats. And it isn't just the boats, we know that.
Yeah.
The Sun's been doing, Sun newspapers been doing a lot of good work recently, exposing many other dimensions to immigration at the moment. And I don't think this tidal wave of people is actually going to stop. I think some forms of legal migration may dissipate a little bit, but we've got this broiling problem. And I think it's very, very worrying. And what we don't have is a clear sense of unifying identity. The government has been too weak on that. So you can have lots of people from different nationalities and it can happily work together if everybody signs up to a shared kind of agenda. You've got some shared principles and everyone signs up to them, but we haven't done that.
Well, it's worth at this point, Isabel, after you saying all of that, which all perfectly reasonable stuff, having a listen to what the Chief Constable said. This is John Bocher. He's the Chief Constable of the Police Service of Northern Ireland. In response to those riots over the last 4 days, he said this.
This behaviour, and I completely endorse what the Chair of the Policing Board has said, is wanton, disgraceful, criminal behaviour that is absolutely race motivated.
And there it is, Isabel. That is one of those kind of establishment responses that is meant to stop the conversation dead. There's nothing more to see here. You're a bunch of racists. Go home.
It's just ridiculous. Look, I haven't been in the area of these riots, so I've got to make that caveat. I don't know how it feels to be there. But I'm going to hazard a guess that these people who are expressing their frustration in entirely the wrong way are not actually racists. They are people who are unbelievably frustrated, disaffected. They may be quite ignorant as well. They may have got quite a lot wrong. But one way or another, those people who are behaving in that way are not only culpable themselves, they are a reflection of total failure of government policy. You can't, as authorities, put this all on those idiots that are behaving in that appalling way and say, we, the authorities, have absolutely no responsibility to bear in how our communities
100%.
Are breaking down.
Yeah, the idea that you would define and conclude the entirety of disquiet based on the race card, it would be extraordinary. But that's where we're at, and we saw our own Prime Minister after Southport do the same thing, Isabel.
Yeah. Well, it's the easiest, laziest way to shrug off your own responsibility and just say these people are not only thuggish, but they're also racist. And in some cases, maybe some of them are. But if the authorities think that that's the explanation and that all they need to do to make this go away is shout that word, then I think that they've got quite a big shot coming. It's bad for everybody.
Of course it is.
Upside to any of this. I mean, it's awful to have to see people putting labels on their doors saying where they're from. But this is where we've come to as a result of a complete failure to hold everybody together as you import millions of people. You can do it. You know, I'm sitting in a country that's done it brilliantly. But what they did as they imported millions of people is actually build the roads, the schools, the hospitals. And they said, guess what, guys, if you're coming in, you're going to really value your visa and you're going to have to work.
It's all pretty straightforward stuff. It's not even hard to work out, is it? It's just a very civil and obvious way to run things. Let's move to story number 2 here, Isabel. The sole survivor of the Air India crash yesterday morning said he has no idea how he escaped the disaster. We know that, sadly, 241 passengers on board were killed. Let's have a listen to the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, speaking after that crash.
Well, the images and news from India is absolutely devastating, and I speak for the entire country in saying our thoughts are with each and every one of those involved. There will be British and Indian families across the land who are absolutely impacted by this, and our thoughts first and foremost are with them. Obviously the investigation is going on. We've dispatched an investigation team that's been deployed. The Foreign Secretary is leading on this, and we'll obviously update as soon as we can. But we're working with the Indian authorities on this to establish the facts. I would say to all families, friends of anybody affected to please contact the Foreign Office for further information.
Keir Starmer speaking yesterday. I mean, it was, you know, just the most devastating story, Isabel, obviously. Just this curious sort of nugget of good news was that one man happened to, and Lord knows how, happened to not just survive, but literally walk away from it.
Yeah, I mean, we're all going to want seat 11A or whatever it was that he was on in any future long haul. And it did make me look again at, you know, the advantage of sitting next to an emergency exit. When you if you've got an interest in aviation disasters, you will find that actually experts say it really does make a difference to your survival odds if you're sitting next to an emergency exit. I think most of us just think, oh, well, if it goes down, we're all doomed anyway. There's going to be such fascination with this guy's story. He obviously will hold the key to some extent to basic bits of the investigation. I think he said that there was a loud bang before the plane went down. That could give investigators quite an important clue as to what did or didn't happen. And you know, the story is so shocking, isn't it? Because we've kind of got used to not having big airliners go down. You know, there are intermittent, periodically, of course, there are tragically plane crashes, but they tend to involve really small aircraft, you know, typically in the UK, tiny aircraft, maybe have 2 people in them, and elsewhere it's sort of planes that are internal flights in developing countries. And this whole thing of a massive airliner going down as it's on its way to London, fortunately we haven't had anything like that for a very long time.
It just doesn't really happen. People think of Lockerbie, but that was a terror-related incident. It just doesn't really happen now. The one thing I sense is missing from this story, Isabel, there's not really any news of casualties who were on the ground. Unless I've missed something here, I would find it extraordinary that a plane could land into a building as it did with people inside it and even those around, and no one lost their life in that position either.
I think they did. I think that I understand that there were 8 lives lost on the ground. I'm very happy to be corrected on that, but that's what I think the position is. As you say, looking at that devastating footage there, you know, it's impossible to imagine if that building was busy, that everybody got out of it alive. And I think that it's very early days. You know, India, I've traveled a lot in India, and it's a pretty chaotic kind of place, bluntly. Of course, they've made massive strides and it's becoming very, very wealthy. But in terms of systems and infrastructure and kind of, we're not talking a parallel here with how it would be in the UK, with the whole thing being sealed off and, officialdom getting to work. It may take quite a while before we actually find out just, unfortunately, who has lost their lives and the scale of those who were injured.
Indeed.